So let's move down to Connecticut, and roughly the same era in the post World War II or immediately around then. And Ralph Sweet started going to dances and checking out the dance scene. I hadn't realized, I knew Ralph as a Contra caller and as a square dance caller, but I hadn't realized how far back in his dance experiences his interest in Contras came.
Well, I was at this long-going square dance in Hadlime, Connecticut. And I got there about a half hour early one night for some strange reason. And here were some people I had seen at the square dance before, but they were mostly old people. There was only one woman there my age. I must have been about 18, old enough to borrow my father's car to go to dances twice a week, which was all square dancing. There was nobody contra dancing in Connecticut. And here's these people doing a strange dance, which turned out to be chorus jig. Later I found out, but they called it opera reel, perhaps because that's the tune they used, but it wasn't the opera reel you find in the books today. It was chorus jig, an earlier version, but it was chorus jig, definitely. I said, this looks pretty interesting. What's going on here, you know? And then I remembered back at my house was a book that my mother had left lying around by Elizabeth Birchinall, a big-time folk dance leader in the New York City and Long Island area, teaching folk dancing in the schools. And here's a book about a contra dance, which was probably held very rarely in Western Mass somewhere, I forget where. And the whole book was about contra dancing with diagrams and explanations and everything. And I thought, I bet that's what those people were doing that I saw at the Hadline Square Dance one night. Of course, as soon as 8 o'clock came, they melted into the usual square dance crowd, and you would never guess that they were doing such a funny thing. So I thought, gee, I wonder if anybody's really doing these contra dances now. And I couldn't seem to get invited to join one of the practices, if you want to call it that. House parties is what they had, and they were very rare, and they were always on some important square dance night, and I couldn't wangle an invitation. So I started asking around and found out that, son of a gun, they did do contra dancing in Connecticut once upon a time. I wonder what happened to it, you know. And is anybody doing it today? So I finally found out that in Brattleboro, Elmer Clark was calling, and in Chesterfield, New Hampshire, a guy named, I think it was Shorty Durand. Did you know him?
That's right, yep.
Yeah, was calling, and he was doing contra dances. Well, they were the typical contra dance that was being done everywhere then. You didn't go out contra dancing, you went out square dancing. And it was never all contras. In fact, both of them, what they called was maybe 4 different contras a night. And in between each contra was a set of squares, 3 squares in a row, and they were all singing squares, by the way. All singing squares. And then they would do maybe 3 waltzes. And everybody would actually get up and waltz. Or maybe polkas or foxtrots, and no, they didn't do any schottisches or any of those Gay Gordons and stuff that I learned later in Boston, and I enjoyed them a lot. So that left only time for 4 different contras, and they were always the same contras. They may have had a repertoire of 5 contras, but one of them they did very rarely, and one of them was not Money Musk until I started going to Fitzwilliam and dancing to Duke Miller. That's where I first encountered Money Musk. And so that got me going to find more and more contra dances. And one time I got married back in '52. And what are we going to do on our honeymoon? Go contra dancing. What the hell? So
What year was this, Val?
I think it was '52, the fall of '52. And so the bed and breakfast lady said, oh, you know, we have a contra dance right here in town. I said, oh, yeah? This was Keene that we went. And she says, yeah, a very famous caller, Ralph Page. I'd never heard of him. So had no idea what was going on in Boston at the time. And so we went to his contra dance, and that's how I met Ralph Page. And later, when my mother made me and my brother earlier join the National Guard to escape being drafted, And I was stationed in Boston, defending Boston, not really from, with anti-aircraft guns, not really from thinking North Korea was going to attack us, but they thought that maybe the Russians would join in on their side. So there was nothing much to do, obviously, in Boston in 1952. And, and so I went out every night of the week. And of course, I went to Ted Sinella's dances on Fridays, the Ralph Page dances every Tuesday. You would take the train down there. And Charlie Baldwin on Wednesdays. And I took up Scottish country dancing and English country dancing and international folk dancing. And I got an education, let me tell you. And that's how I really got rolling into the country. And then I tried to sell this idea back in Connecticut. Just forget it. Those traditional square dancers, they didn't even want to know about it, really. And they just couldn't understand the complexity of down the center and back and cast off. And now you've moved down one notch and you're going to be dancing with the next couple. And it was all over their heads. Well, they didn't want to know it, is what it was. Right. So I had to give up for quite a few years trying to promote Contra dancing until, luckily, 1976 rolled around. And that was the 200th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, as if it only happened in 76. But anyway, that's when everybody celebrated it. And I thought, I know what? I'm in this fife and drum corps, and they had a artificers unit, you know, the blacksmith and people making this and that and the other thing, colonial stuff. Why not let's have a dance group doing the dances that they did in colonial times, which we picked the Contra dances. And that was when I really got going with the Contra dance thing in Connecticut.